know.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Meet the Candidates event for the City of Saratoga Springs Commissioner of Public Safety. All candidates on the ballot were invited. This event was organized by the League of Women Voters of Saratoga County. My name is Kathy Kobrick. I am a member of the League of Women Voters of Saratoga County. I live in the town of Malta, and I will be your moderator tonight. The League of Women Voters of Saratoga County is a nonpartisan volunteer political organization dedicated to the informed and responsible participation of citizens in government. The League never supports or opposes any political party or candidate. This has been our League policy since 1920, so 101 years. Membership is open to anyone who is eligible to register and vote, whether male or female. Please consider joining your local league. Before we start, I want to remind the candidates and our audience that the video taken tonight is the property of the league and can only be used by the league or licensed media according to FCC regulations. This event will be posted in its entirety. It may not be used by the candidates except to post a link to the complete video. We do not make this request lightly. We have had recent experiences where candidates or their supporters have used portions of our video or an audience member's own video against their opponent. The League is a nonpartisan organization, and the use of the video by a campaign specifically against another candidate goes against our purpose. Additionally, this behavior would discredit us as candidates, making it difficult for us to sponsor future forums. All candidates participating this evening have pledged that they will abide by our policy. Questions were sent to us by members of the community. League members reviewed and compiled them to be representative and to avoid redundancy. We reject any questions of a personal nature. Candidates, this is your opportunity to let voters know your stance on these topics and how you will address the issues facing the city of Saratoga Springs. Please don't waste valuable time tearing down or labeling your opponent. Deal with the facts. In your closing statements, no zingers. Don't put your opponent down or on the spot with no chance to reply. We have timers for this evening's event. Cards will be held up for the candidates to glance at. Green means 1 minute left. Yellow means 1.5 minutes left. And 30 seconds. Yellow means 30 seconds left, and red means stop. Each candidate was given 2 red cards that they can use during the question and answer period, and they are just have to raise their hand and tell me that they would like an additional minute. They can only use 2, and they cannot be used during opening or closing statements. There are 3 candidates for 1 commissioner of public safety position. The candidates in alphabetical order are David A. Labatt of the Working Families Party, Tracy LaBelle running on the Representative and Republican and Conservative party lines, and James A. Montagno on the Democratic and Resilient Saratoga party line. All the candidates were invited to participate, although we did not hear from the Working Families candidate, David A. Labatt. He didn't respond to our invitation. Okay, so now it is time to hear their 2-minute opening statement. They have drawn lots to determine the order. The first to speak will be James A. Montagno, but I've been told that I can call him Jim for the remainder of this forum. So Jim, when you're ready, you can do your opening statement.
First, I'd like to thank the League for their invitation and for their perseverance in getting this forum to happen. And I'd also like to thank Tracy for agreeing to participate. My name is Jim Montagnino, and I'm the Democratic candidate for Commissioner of Public Safety. I retired this past April from the New York State court system, where I served for 26 years as a principal court attorney and referee. I previously served as a prosecutor and a criminal defense lawyer, and I also trained police officers at the Westchester County Police Academy. My wife Nancy is an attorney who represents the mentally ill. We bought our first home in Geyser Crest nearly 20 years ago. We've been living in our present home just past the East Side Rec for 15 years. Both our children graduated Saratoga Springs schools, and Nancy and I are hopefully and proudly expecting our first grandchild in January. I was motivated to seek the office of Commissioner of Public Safety by the Darrell Mount case. I was saddened to see how a lack of leadership and a lack of courage on the part of public officials cast a cloud of suspicion over our police department that has lingered for more than 8 years. As Public Safety Commissioner, I will use my skills as a detail-oriented attorney to provide the public with long-sought answers to the lingering questions surrounding the Mount case, and I will restore trust in our law enforcement officers. I strongly support a civilian review board that would make recommendations to the Commissioner on issues relating to police conduct and provide accountability to the community. Our growing homeless population needs assistance to provide them with access to needed services, and all Saratogians deserve a city that is peaceful, safe, and open to all. We've needed a third fire and EMS station for many years. I'll act to see that it is finally built, equipped, and staffed with trained firefighters and EMTs. Public safety is the name of the job. I have the experience, the knowledge, and the courage to make the tough decisions to keep our city safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, Tracy, when you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Good evening. Thank you so much to the League of Women's Voters for having me and for all that you do. I also want to wish my opponent a best of luck, and thank you also for attending. I'm Tracy LaBelle. I'm running for Public Safety Commissioner. I was born and raised in Saratoga Springs. I attended Caroline Street Elementary School and graduated from Saratoga Springs High School, class of 1999. I gained a bachelor's in Siena College and a master's degree in education from St. Joseph's College. My desire to serve started at a very young age. My father, my role model, served as the longest Saratoga Springs City Court judge, nearly 40 years. I grew up with the city's public servants around my kitchen table. I have worked within the healthcare arena for over a decade. With my professional experience, I am a proven decision maker, leader, and communicator under extreme life or death situations. As a clinical device specialist, I've assisted in hundreds of surgical cases, including the most critical cases, trauma and emergency operating rooms. In high pressure situations, I'm required to focus and stay calm. It is vital that I will always respond with effective and proactive communication. With my leadership throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, I was called to develop innovative solutions to meet essential requirements under the pandemic restrictions. While working at hospice, I created and implemented emergency prepared plans required by the federal and state law. I was responsible for critically ill patients across 4 local counties, including part of Saratoga County. I worked with not only healthcare systems and emergency services teams, but also the Department of Health, rapid response teams, Centers for Medicaid and Medicare, and Hospice Palliative Care of New York. I created all policy and procedures, training and assessments, and communication plans. I understand the immensity and importance of public safety. With my experience, I will be a leader. I will identify with problems, uncover insights, and calmly work to provide solutions for Saratoga. I will do the work. I will do the work with our stakeholders so that we are successful.
Okay, thank you very much. Both of you stayed right in your 2-minute limit. Okay, now it's time for questions from the audience. You're going to have 1.5 minutes to answer each question, and you don't have to respond if you don't want to. You have 2 opportunities to use those red cards, as I mentioned, for an additional minute. Just hold up that red card and say, I want to use it, and we'll make sure the timers add the minute on, and then you'll go on. You can't use those during your opening or closing statement. And we're going to keep track of how many red cards you use, so don't try to use 3. Okay, so we're going to start the first question to Jim, and from then on, we're going to rotate who goes first and second. Jim, how do you plan to communicate and work with all Saratoga Springs residents, and how can you ensure that the public feels welcome at City Council meetings?
Thanks, Kathleen. That's an excellent question and a timely one because of the situation that's occurred in recent City Council meetings. First, in terms of communicating with the public, One of the greatest experiences that I have each year is participating with the Saratoga Bar Association with the Lawyer in the Classroom program. And I'd like to extend that as if I'm lucky enough and blessed to be elected commissioner, I'd want to have a public outreach. I'd like to go to the schools and talk with students, introduce them to firefighters and police officers, and make our uniformed services more visible and relatable to the community. As far as the city council meetings go, I think we need to recognize two things. We need to be civil, we need to let democracy work, and we need to listen to people's concerns. And those two things can happen peacefully and harmoniously. I understand the message that certain people want to impart, but I may disagree with their methods. And I would insist that there be a respect for everybody, for the people who are the members of the city council, as well as the people who have issues that they want to present there. And so I would ask that people abide by the law and by the rules of civility. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, Tracy, it's your turn.
Can you ask it one more time? I just want to make sure.
Yes. How do you plan to communicate and work with all Saratoga Springs residents? And how can you ensure that the public feels welcome at city council meetings?
Thank you. I'm a leader that will be making the phone calls and collaborating with all seats at the table. I feel very strongly that all seats need to be invited, including our community and our unions as well. The morale needs to be improved. Conversations just need to be started again. The misinformation needs to be eliminated, and there needs to be designated channels of information determined. I feel very strongly that the numerous amounts of publications that come out of City Hall and out of City Council it instills fear, it instills confusion. I feel by having a designated channel, and I feel that having boundaries and having a code of conduct that is enforced and boundaries actually in place during city council meetings will be a huge benefit in instilling the civility and the respect and getting working communication between not only the city council and the community, but the community and our law enforcement. All the way around, I think that we've always lacked communication.
Okay, thank you very much. So this time, since there's only two of you, it's going to bounce back and forth kind of crazily. But this second question is going to go to you first, Tracy. Can you describe some of the public safety issues facing different parts of our city and how you will plan to address them?
Obviously, the largest one that we have right now is the divide between our community and our law enforcement. The divide between our community members, there needs to be a collaboration. And again, all seats, all stakeholders have to have a voice at the table. I think that given the heightened climate of politics, both nationally and statewide, has influenced our city too much. I think we need to get back to hearing each other talk and having a common ground. I feel that also that there is a lack of resources for our police department and for our fire department. I think that there's an added stress for not having the training and having a militarized police department when they're really a community-based excellent department. So I just think that by building the bridge, having the meetings, making the dialogue, we will be able to stop a lot of the issues that we have at hand.
Okay, thank you very much. Jim?
Okay, this is a very important question for the community, because what we see is a tension between social justice protesters and law enforcement that has been ratcheting up in recent weeks to a point where it's at a boil. And in order to maintain safety and peace in the community, I think it's incumbent on our leaders to try to turn down the temperature. The basis of the problem is the Darrell Mount case. And I've read nearly 2,000 pages of documents, all of which are available for public inspection. And I understand the basic problem is a lack of communication. The answer to the question of what happened that night is available in the public domain. And if elected, I will present on Inauguration Day, a written report about what happened, to take that off the table. Having done that, the Commissioner of Public Safety has to set policy standards in order to deal fairly but firmly with people who break the law. So that the recent arrests of people using warrants as opposed to summonses is something that should have been addressed by a policy decision from the Commissioner of Public Safety. If a petty offense is committed in the past, the offender should be given a summons to allow them the opportunity to come into court without having to be put in handcuffs first. That's basically it.
Would you like to use your red card or?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay. All right, you get to answer this one first, Jim. What changes would you make to your department if you are elected? And what do you think is running well there?
I'd like to answer that actually in reverse order. What's running well there is the amazing self-discipline that our police officers have shown in the face of some really challenging times. I felt awful to see police officers screamed at, yelled at, taunted, and not one of them, not one rose to the bait, and they deserve to be commended for that. The changes I would make would be from the top. The city charter requires that the Commissioner of Public Safety set policy. There's been no policy set. The charter requires that the Commissioner of Public Safety have a plan for getting the police department accredited. In the 20 years since that charter provision was enacted, no public safety commissioner has been able to accomplish that. And so that's a change I would make. And finally, the third change I would make is, and at this point, I'd like to use my red card if I could. I would like to.
Let's give them time to add a minute on. Are you ready, timers? Okay, go ahead.
I would like, in the interim period, I know that the City Council is working on a civilian review board, but in the meantime, the Commissioner of Public Safety is intended by the city charter to be the civilian liaison between the uniformed services and the populace. And I think it's important that the commissioner set a policy to say the door is open. If you have a problem or a complaint or a suggestion, or if you want to commend an officer for particularly a good conduct, the door is open. Talk to me about it. There's supposed to be an avenue of communication, and unfortunately that avenue has been blocked for at least the 8 years since the Darrow Mount incident. And that's what I'm going to change.
Okay, thank you very much. Tracy?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I agree with a lot that Jim has said. Actually, I agree with all of it, for the most part. I do think that they've been given the police department and our fire department and a lot of our public safety servants they've been given a disjustice. There isn't any communication, like I said before, and there isn't an open door policy. There is a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of direction. No one really views the public safety commissioner as being a leader. I think given the strenuous times that we've had in the last year and a half, 2 years, has put a lot of stresses on people that the city council as a whole. In regards to what's going on, what I would do is I would put a 360-degree communication model in place. My door will always be open. I will be there not only to hear the good or the bad and the ugly, but I want to hear the good. I want to be able to provide the resources and be the voice at the table to provide the training, to provide the resources, and be that person to make our excellent department, better. I do feel that our law enforcement doesn't really have a voice at the moment. I know that we have 2 wonderful chiefs. I feel that our PBA and our unions have to have a louder voice. They do contribute a lot of the work, and they do have a lot of the screaming and the disrespect in their faces. I will be their advocate. I will make sure that there is a plan in place, and if that plan doesn't work, I will recreate one.
Thank you. Okay, this next one's gonna go to you, Tracy, first. With the construction of a third EMS station on east side, the city will need to staff and manage the facility. How will you address and balance the city's need for fire, police, and medical emergency services alongside the need for traffic and code enforcement?
First and foremost, we need to have our current stations staffed appropriately and running to best benefit not only our community, but to have the safety of our firefighters and our EMS safe as well. In regards to the third fire station, I truly am over the moon that it's going to happen. Being in hospice, I have seen patients that are terminally ill in that area of our city that haven't been able to obtain the services that they need when they're in critical pain, and it is a necessary building. So in regards to staffing it, I will work with our finance commissioner to ensure that I am the voice at the table to get them the resources and the staffing that they need and the allocations they need to have the appropriate materials, the appropriate rigs, what they need to service them so that they're running efficiently and compliant with both their state and federal laws.
Okay, thank you very much. Jim?
This is an excellent question because it comes on the heels of the proposed budget that the City Council talked about at its last meeting. The construction and the equipping of the third fire station is going to require an additional 12 to 16 firefighters. And it's a matter of pride that in our city, the firefighters are also EMTs, so they serve double duty. But in order to provide 24/7 coverage of a third fire station, we're going to need a lot of additional people who have to be trained. So this has to be put in the planning well before the station opens, because the new recruits have to go through the academy. They have to be vetted. They have to be prepared. And unfortunately, the proposed budget only calls for 4 additional firefighters. So that's going to have to be revisited if we're going to have the kind of staffing that's necessary for the firefighters and the public to be safe. As a very specific example, I've spoken with the firefighters, and they currently work on a model where there are 4 firefighters to a unit that rolls out of a station. There are cities that are using 3-member units, and some cities that are even down as far as 2 members per unit. I would like to see our third station staffed in the same proportion that the other 2 are, which is to say with the appropriate safe number of 4 members per unit. And that's going to require revisiting the budget.
Okay, thank you. Jim, this one's to you first. Do you believe that the Saratoga Springs emergency plan is adequate? And for instance, what additional emergencies do you think we might need to prepare for, like extreme weather related events or even civil unrest?
Well, thankfully, in terms of extreme weather events, we're blessed with a remarkable location. I mean, Saratoga Springs is 430 feet above sea level, which is high enough in the floodplain and the Hudson River Valley to keep us out of significant likelihood of severe flooding, which is something that can't be said for some of our neighboring communities. I mean, Schoharie County was decimated. Parts of Rensselaer County were devastated. Thankfully, that's highly unlikely. But on the other hand, it's unfortunate that civil unrest is a potential cause of emergency. And there, again, the issue is leadership, and the Commissioner of Public Safety needs to have a working relationship with county law enforcement as well as the state police in order to have a plan in place to mobilize units in the event of that kind of a necessity. And that's something that has to be ready for any eventuality. I would hope to be able to turn the temperature down so that civil unrest isn't as likely as it's been in the last 2 summers, but we should hope for the best and be prepared for the worst. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Tracy?
Thank you. As far as our emergency preparedness plan that we have right now on our website, it's very difficult to find. It doesn't state how it's updated. It's supposed to be updated every 2 years. Given what's been going on in the COVID pandemic, I feel that we could have been a lot better prepared for such a thing as a pandemic. And I didn't see in our COVID preparedness plan for our city anyone written in that has, illnesses that are homebound, that have hospice services. And then let's talk about our third station our third fire station. If we don't have our current fire station staffed appropriately, how would we be able to overcome a pandemic or a civil unrest? How do we overcome those things if we don't have a proper plan in place? Those are things that haven't really been touched on until we were in the predicament that we're in right now, which, to be honest, I don't really feel that there was any any source of publication from our city council or from our city court or from either of our departments. And I don't blame anybody for not doing it. I just don't think anyone knew how to do it sufficiently. I bring that to the table. I did it on a federal and a state level. And I think if we had this happen again, we'd be much more prepared if I was in the city council seat.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, Tracy, you get this question first. Do you support the recommendations of the city's police reform task force, including the creation of a civilian review board? You have to unmute.
I thought I did. I apologize.
Oh, that's all right. Now
Given the current ordinance for the Civil Review Board, now named, the Community Police Board, at the last city council meeting, I feel that this ordinance was thrown into movement abruptly. I have met with Jason Gullup in the task force. I feel that it doesn't seem well thought out and does not carry out any of the recommendations presented by the task force. This ordinance could have been presented months ago. In regards to its lack of detail in comparison to the third resolution presented, I just feel that it's very vague. However, I do support it if it's done correctly. I will listen to all the stakeholders, from the chief of police to the PBA to the city council and of course the task force, and make it work to best benefit our city and all the parties involved. I do think that it can be a good positive addition to our city. I feel strongly that it needs extreme collaboration and relentless attention to be implemented the proper way.
Okay, thank you very much. Jim?
I support wholeheartedly the specific task force recommendation regarding the Civilian Review Board. The task force took a lot of time and effort and were very careful in the manner in which they came up with the proposal regarding how the CRB would be organized, the rules of evidence and procedure under which it would work, its powers to compel testimony and compel the production of documents, and so forth. And most importantly, what I like about the task force's recommendations is that they recognize that the city charter itself authorizes the Commissioner of Public Safety and the Commissioner of Public Safety only as the authority with the ability to discipline the uniformed services. And so the CRB's role should be limited to making a recommendation to the commissioner. Unfortunately, the proposed ordinance, which has already been amended with a draft amendment, doesn't carry with it the level of detail that's going to be necessary, first of all, to comply with the State Administrative Procedures Act, secondly, to comply with the city charter, and third, to provide with provisions in the state constitution regarding opportunity to be heard and notice to the public. There are other recommendations of the task force that I happen to agree with, particularly with regard to increasing the level of training. And if I may use my second card here, please.
Yep.
The recommendations regarding the increasing the level of training for officers, increasing the way in which they are equipped. And I think that on a going forward basis, there should be a much more careful screening of applicants for police officers. And in that same regard, I think that our officers should be paid better so that in the future, we can attract the best, most dedicated and reliable people to fulfill the needs for the future of law enforcement, which, the recommendations of the task force certainly are worthy of consideration. But for example, when they recommend sending social workers to certain situations, I know from my past experience that situations often unfold very rapidly. I would much rather see a police officer who has all of the tools necessary, who has been trained to use the least intrusive alternatives to defuse a situation, but who has the training to do what's necessary to prevent harm to others or to himself or herself.
Thank you. Very good. Okay. Jim, you're going to get this one first. What do you think the role of the Public Safety Department is in dealing with the growing issue of homelessness downtown? Do you believe the city should actively support the creation of a navigation center, a facility that supplies services, including shelter to homeless persons?
Again, thanks for a great question. I volunteered to work at Code Blue a few years back. I spent a few weekends there. And in honesty, I did it not as an altruistic move, but more because I wanted to see for myself. I wanted to know what kind of services we provided to the homeless. And more importantly, I wanted to know who these people are. And I was quite surprised at the ability that I had of carrying on a conversation with the majority of the folks who were there. There are homeless people in our city who are veterans with severe PTSD, who have difficulty in living in communal settings. We have many people with serious mental illness. We have people with substance abuse problems. And I think it's very important for the Department of Public Safety to play a role. There should be a navigation center because the folks who need these services are in the worst position possible to be able to navigate their way to getting them. So we should provide that for sure. We need a common sense approach. Homelessness is a difficult problem. It's been forced on us by many factors, one of which is the fact that the state has been closing inpatient psychiatric facilities and drug treatment facilities. That's something we should be vocally opposed to. But also, public safety department should be trained to deal with homelessness as the problem that it is, and to treat the homeless with the respect and dignity of human beings that we ought to show them.
Thank you very much. Tracy?
Thanks. Homelessness in Saratoga has been working so hard to remedy this. RISE, Code Blue, Shelters of Saratoga, Franklin Community Center, and obviously the Community Development Program in the mayoral office have been in constant movement trying to make our homeless not only just have steps for success, but preventative programs in place also. I myself, I feel ashamed that I didn't know more about Homeless Court before taking this role on. Homeless Court has partnered with RISE and has been very successful in improving the quality of life for our homeless individuals, giving them the resources not only to succeed, but again, preventative services. So, I mean, from the 70 people about that we have right now, of all walks of life and not necessarily on the street, they're getting the help they need. I will continue to work with all those organizations in place and will assist to seek out ways to initiate additional funding, given that their funding may be taken away and is coming to an end. I will support and activate for our city in regards to the needs of our homeless. It's something that's kind of close to home with me, including assisting in building in a drop-in center. The reason why these homeless people, especially the ones downtown, are congregating is because they have nowhere else to go. And people, I think, are quick to say, you know, get rid of the problem, but we can't get rid of the problem, which it's not a problem. It's an issue. It's a clinical issue on a lot of levels, and it can be
Would you like to continue?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
So I feel that working with our homeless, so they have a complete health assessment and steps to move forward to succeed, not only just a drop-in center, but I fully support a gradual housing format for our homeless, including working with our veterans, working with all all the facilities and organizations that surround and that are in Saratoga, this is an issue, which I hate even calling it that can be remedied if we all can come together and that we can provide the funding that it needs to succeed.
Okay, thank you. All right, you're going to get this question now, Tracy. The police department has been involved in several public controversies. For example, comments made by the police chief, the use of military equipment during protests, and the recent arrest of Black Lives Matter activists. What do you think about the public safety department's response to these events, and how will you respond to similar events if you are elected?
Thank you. I feel very strongly that we have an excellent police department. I think that our police department is extremely frustrated. I think they're targeted on many levels. I'm not saying that everything that was said was appropriate, nor was in the right timing. I do feel that they lacked leadership in that department. I feel that they could have had, if there was the correct communication channels in place and one person and or two that were giving not the misinformation, but the right information to our community. I feel that this heightened divisiveness with our law enforcement and the knee-jerk reactions that our police, not just our police department, but our community as a whole, it's easier to be mad and aggressive than it is to sit down and have a conversation. There needs to be a conversation, and not everybody's going to get along, and not everybody's going to have the same united approach, but we need to figure it out. There needs to be another place other than city council to have this open opinion, to have the conversation. And I think that is simply the lack of follow through, the lack of doing the job.
Okay, thank you very much. Jim?
I'd like to correct a slight error in the question itself. There was a reference to the comments made by the chief. I think the question refers to a press conference that was held on June 28th, at which the assistant chief made comments that went viral and were a catalyst for a lot of uneasiness. Those comments were out of place and should never have been made in the first place. What I found was the real source of the problem is a lack of leadership from the Department of Public Safety. The commissioner is there to be the liaison between the police department and the public. And it's unfortunate there were comments made by the assistant chief that day. There have been comments made to the press by various other members of law enforcement. There's no leadership there. The police should be allowed to do their jobs. The Commissioner of Public Safety should be the first person to respond to the public on questions about what the police are doing, what they should do, what they ought to do, and so forth. And certainly, so there needs to be some policy there with regard to who is to speak and when. I'm disappointed that no one has taken the assistant chief to task for that comment.
Thank you. Okay, Jim, you're going to get this question, and it comes from our the community, as all of these do. Would you support having the city issue a municipal ID to any proven resident who requests one?
I certainly would, and I'll tell you why. I worked as an assistant district attorney and a criminal defense attorney for years in parts of the state where there is a large population of undocumented people. And what I found is that many of them are the victims of crime because the criminals, the perpetrators, understand that they don't have access to services. They are reluctant to go to the police. They're reluctant to report crimes. I think that what's important is that we as a community recognize the fact that there are people living among us who are undocumented. And we should basically, when it comes to services such as police services, fire services, allow people to live as human beings. And so a municipal ID card that could solve the interim problem of a person who's here without any other form of identification would be a humane kind of thing to offer.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that mix up with the time. All right, Tracy?
Thanks. I need to research this a little bit more, but in regards to the ID, I think that every individual should have the necessary identification to obtain the healthcare that they need. I think that they should be given the documentation to get a job. However, I feel that for the safety of our city and for one another, I think it's something that we should know. We should know who our community is. And I'm not saying that I need to research it more, but I feel that every individual should have an identification that they can obtain the services that they need to succeed and have a quality of life. Absolutely. It does concern me that if it was an individual that would be of harm of our community and we didn't know it, that would be concerning to me. So I'm not going to say that I'm 100% for it or 100% against it. I think that there's weighing factors, and I would have to see in regards to our community in itself if it would benefit.
Okay, thank you very much. Tracy, do you plan to implement a reverse 911 alert system?
No, I don't. I haven't thought it out. I haven't talked about it. I don't think that it's a necessary. I'm not going to answer the question because I'm not 100% sure of the answer I would give.
Okay, that's fine. No problem. Jim?
I think, speaking frankly, we're going to have our hands full equipping, or rather constructing, equipping, and manning the third fire station. And so while a reverse 911 system would be a nice enhancement, I don't see it in the foreseeable future. We really have a lot of work ahead of us, as I mentioned earlier, with the budgetary problems. I would certainly much rather see the right number of people to fill the 24/7 requirements of the third fire station and have that up and running satisfactorily before we start getting to desirable but otherwise difficult enhancements to use to augment our emergency services.
Okay. Tracy, I think you want to use your last red card?
I don't. I don't.
Okay, no worries. This is the last question we're going to have before closing statement. So, and it is going to go to Jim first. The economy of Saratoga Springs is based in large part on tourism, which brings expenses as well as income. How can we provide for safety and order while still being welcoming to all segments of our community and to the public?
Well, that's another great question, because if you look at Saratoga Springs, as you say, our economy is based to a very large extent on tourism and hospitality. And in the track season, certainly our population temporarily expands enormously. And if you compare the emergency services and police resources of Saratoga Springs with other cities, you find that we are really short in resources when you think about our population as it swells in the summer months. And one of the things that I would want to offer to the city council, there's been a lot of debate, for example, on the question of whether bars should close at 2 o'clock as opposed to 4 o'clock. I think we should have an open discussion about having user fees, where if a bar wants to stay open past 2 a.m., that's fine. But there should be a rational, objective way of defraying the expenses that the population has to bear in providing the police and emergency services for that 2-hour period with the additional traffic and the problems that are associated with alcohol consumption in the wee hours of the morning.
Okay, thank you. Tracy?
Can you ask that question one more time,
I
please?
certainly can. The economy of Saratoga Springs is based in large part on tourism, which brings expenses as well as income. How can we provide for safety and order while still being welcoming to all segments of our community and the public?
I think that obviously we don't want to ever detour added tourism to our city. It is that sort of become the backbone of us, especially during this pandemic coming out of it. We need to find other areas that we can pull from to, I think that would be a great idea to tax bars or to somehow get funding from bars that want to stay open longer. That is a very good idea. I also think that given that we have SPAC, we have actually our Live Nation, we have NYRA. So why don't we actually take something back from NYRA and get some more money to get funding, to get us more support services, or to have more police officers or additional shifts or whatever we need to do to ensure our safety. I also think that I was actually at the fireman union. They go to calls that are all the time. They're just false alarms. So they have to get all suited up. They have to go to Skidmore. And this doesn't just happen 1 or 2 times a week. It happens probably once a day. So what if we did something to say, like college? I went to Siena. When we would have a false alarm, we would get fined $25. And the school, Siena, would give the money, X amount of dollars, to the city. And that would go towards their public safety fund. That's something that we could do. It's never been brought up. It's just an idea from hearing from the fire department. Can I extend?
Yeah.
I think that would be a good idea. The college is here 7 months out of the year. That could be an outlet of funding. Live Nation, SPAC, NYRA. There are ways to do this. And I think also if we start to kind of narrow down on maybe our short-term rentals, we can find the money if we need the money. We just need to do the work.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, it's now time for our closing statement. Candidates, you have no more than 1 minute each to make your final statement. First to speak is going to be Jim again.
One of my favorite proverbs is more words mean less. So I know you've given me a minute. I don't think I need a minute. I just want to say thank you again to the league for hosting this. I want to thank Tracy for being a great sport throughout the campaign. We've bumped into each other a couple of times on the campaign trail. It's been very cordial. We've both chosen to go above the fray and deal with this as civilized Saratogians. Again, thank you so much. Communication is key, and that I think would be the cornerstone of my administration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. Tracy.
Thank you, Jim. That was very nice of you. And I agree. As a mom, a wife, and a resident, I know that everyone desires a safe environment to raise a family and a government that addresses the issues that affect their daily lives. I do firmly believe that we need to maximize every opportunity to make Saratoga better. I will stand up and support all the stakeholders, and I will ensure that all the stakeholders are invited to the table. I'm a leader, and I will be making the phone calls, like I said before, and collaborating with all, not just with some. Our city's morale really desperately needs to be improved, and the conversations need to be started. The city needs someone with integrity and loves our city and is grounded and logical. I've proven that I've always remained calm, focused, and professional, especially in tense situations. My experience, my values, and my leadership, I will play a positive role in the betterment of our society, or in our city. I will listen and I will do the work.
Okay, thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you.
Please remember to vote. Besides the candidates, there will be 5 proposals on the back of your ballot. So be sure to turn that over and look those over. Early voting starts from October 23rd through October 31st. Absentee ballots may be requested by mail until October 18th and postmarked by November 2nd. Absentee ballots may be requested in person by November 1st and returned in person by November 2nd by 2 p.m. The general election is November 2nd. Polls open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Please check with your local Board of Elections for polling places. Thank you, candidates, for attending this event and being civil and answering the questions so well and helping to educate the voters. And thank you, audience, for taking the time to learn about the candidates. Good night, everybody.